Welcome to episode 96 of the ADV podcast. And we've got an interesting one for you today, or I should say myself and Creepy Milk do. In any case, don't worry, I'll explain shortly. You'll know exactly what's going on. But yeah, I'm going to be, for the most part, hosting this solo today. But I'm pretty sure, C-Milk's supposed to pop in and explain why shortly. Anyway, let's get right into it, guys. We're going to start out, of course, with What's New, where we talk about what's new in China. And of course, unfortunately, we cannot escape the whole Olympics drama. The Beijing Winter Olympics 2022 goes on. And as usual, we have to deal with all the nonsense that comes along with it. Now, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but, we've recently been talking about Eileen Gu a lot, simply because of the whole very strange situation surrounding her circumstances. The fact that she is representing China, and yet is a US citizen and holds dual citizenship, which, by the way, is against the law in China. If you hold dual citizenship, well, you're not allowed to hold dual citizenship in the first place. You actually cannot, as a Chinese person, by Chinese law, have more than one citizenship. But of course, in order to represent China in the Olympics or any other big competition, you are not allowed, definitely not allowed to have dual citizenship, according to their own laws. However, they make exceptions and turn blind eyes whenever it is in their favor, whenever it helps them out. And this has seen a lot of weird and hilarious situations crop up with regarding to Eileen Gu, especially her ignorance surrounding China, which is blatantly on display once again as she keeps sharing her Instagram handle on Weibo. Now, for those of you who don't know what Weibo is China's Twitter knockoff. That's how it started. It's got a lot more features than Twitter, but it started as that. And so she's on Weibo with a huge amount of fans. She's followed, by a ton of people. She's verified on Weibo, obviously, she's a national hero. And she's posting her Instagram handle on there. It's like, come follow me on Instagram if you want to see more pictures type thing. This is absurd because if you think about it, the majority of her followers on Weibo cannot view Instagram. It's banned. It's blocked. You can't use a VPN in China legally. And yet there she is showing her Instagram handle. Now, of course, the irony is thick, and she has been doing it a lot. She constantly shares her Instagram handle there. I mean, it's dumb. It's kind of, I don't know how to explain it. It's advertising an illegal thing, and yet she's getting away with it. I guess it's the same as if you put out an advert for, selling legitimate pharmaceuticals, but then have a link to where you can buy illegal drugs on the same page. It's just kind of bizarre. Anyway, one of the users on our subreddit came up with this fantastic meme, as you can see behind me. I've been using this everywhere. It is the Marie Antoinette comparison that I made in the last podcast, where it really is a let them eat cake moment. Or, it turns out there's a very similar saying in Chinese, which is let them eat minced meat, which is a similar thing when an emperor in the past also had a bunch of starving peasants and so on and couldn't understand why they couldn't just eat minced meat. So it's kind of ironic. So now we're going to have to move into something a little more dour, I suppose you could say, something a little less cheery. Today's not going to be a very cheery episode, unfortunately, but it's important nonetheless. And we're going to start out with this whole idea of forced contraception. Now, this is a kind of it's kind of common knowledge that in China, they get to decide your reproductive rights, okay, as a woman, as a family. And what happens usually, at least what happened in the past, is they would have the one-child policy, and they would force abortions, and they would force you to get sterilized and things like that. They can do that. The government has the power. But now, of course, they have a lacking workforce, so now they're trying to do the opposite. And at least Creepy Milk and myself, we predict that there will come a time where they actually force people to conceive and have children. It's getting there. I mean, the incentives are already there. They're offering interest-free loans. They're offering special subsidies, all sorts of things to people who have more children. And soon it'll probably get to the point where they kind of make it mandatory. You must get pregnant for your country type thing. Anyway, this is an interesting one because we have this article here, which started to gain a little bit of attention. Let me get over here on Twitter and so on, because you can see here a couple of people were posting, the Global Times will see your time abortion issue and raise you a woman's body does not really belong to herself. And woman's body does not really belong to herself. It can belong to the state. And people were tweeting this and sharing this article around. And as a result, of course, it got too much attention and bam, Global Times took it down. Good thing we've got archive.org, right? So I'm going to just read you a couple of interesting things from this Global Times article. I have it up here. And please bear with me today. I'm running the thing solo, so it's a little here and there. You may have to put up with some of my technical mishaps here. Anyway. So it starts by saying, woman's body does not really belong to herself. It can belong to the state in some cases. Deng Yaqing, mother of a newborn son in Jiangxi province, discovered this when she was told by the local residential community's administrator that she would not get a hukou or household registration for her firstborn unless she placed an IUD, a contraceptive ring, inside her womb. So, you see, this is kind of a crazy thing. Hukous are a person's legitimacy and identity in China. Think of yourself if you're American, but you don't have a social security number, you don't have a birth certificate, and you don't have an ID, you don't have a driver's license, and what can you do? You wouldn't be able to buy alcohol, you wouldn't be able to register for anything in the government, you wouldn't be able to open a bank account or a credit card or anything. Because without those basic forms of identification, you can't get anything done. Well, it's even worse in China. That hukou, that residence permit, it basically makes you a human. And if you do not possess such a thing, you can't do anything. You will not be able to get education. You will not be able to buy things. You won't be able to, like I said, open a bank account, do anything official. You basically are, well, you'll have to resort to mooching off family, I suppose, or begging people for money or something like that. So, as you can see in this particular circumstance, and this is obviously because in that particular region they have an issue with a certain minority or a certain group of people having too many children, so they're like, nah, that's not allowed anymore. So they threatened her by saying that her firstborn child will not get a hukou, in other words, will not be a legitimate citizen of China, unless, of course, she gets this IUD surgery. Anyway, it's a pretty crappy thing, and it just once again puts a highlight on the plight of women in China. This is something that we've talked about quite a lot because we see ridiculous amounts of support for China when it comes to equality of the sexes in and amongst the weird left versus right infighting that you find in America and in the Western world. People are always trying to champion, for some reason, women's rights in China, but they're very misguided and obviously don't know what's going on. And I really wish those people would educate themselves, read articles like this, and see what the Chinese state really thinks about women's rights and reproductive rights. Let's move on. Wrong mouse. Operating 3 computers here at the same time is a bit of a weirdo situation. Okay. A bit of a follow-up. Now, remember last time or the time before? Yeah, the time before, sorry. We spoke about the mother of 8 who was chained up in that like pigsty in rural China, and she was forced to have 8 children by her captors. Well, China Uncle Mikey, who we introduced you to, has actually done a follow-up. So I suggest you go and watch his video after this. But I came across this interesting clip from Taiwan TV, and I thought I'd play it for you all so that you guys could get an idea of the kind of attitude surrounding this. So let's take a look. I'm going to pop out of here, and we're going to watch this quickly.
先澄清个概念，不管人口怎么样的失衡，男女如何的不够，都不能用拐卖的，对不对？对，人口怎么可以用拐卖的？这第一个故事。董家生了8个小孩，因为他爸爸这个姓董的爸爸跟他的兄弟弟弟3个男的一起共用这个女的，他是共用的，这精神错乱是这样子搞出来的。因为他们太穷了，娶不起媳妇，所以3个人买1个来一起用。 才生了8个小孩，所以他们为什么要压这个事情？因为现在冬奥时间要压下来。我现在讲的意思是说，这整件事情，中华人民共和国要不要脸啊？你这种国家在办冬奥，你现在有几万人，你现在有这种事情发生，中央毫无动静，这个是人间炼狱，多邪恶才干得出这种事情来。你这种国家还想要统一台湾，你要不要脸啊？哎，你这么邪恶的国家，有这种人民，有这种素质，你够资格来跟我们谈，他能够管制香港，你要统一台湾，那个文明的程度是低劣啊！
我都发毛了。
是人类的这种低于人类的下限的程度，这种不要脸的政府，中国的公安是全世界最严格的公安，
没错，
他人脸辨识系统，他的监视器到处都控制的滴水不漏。找不到这个案子吗？当然找得到嘛！为什么要5万户在干这个事情？光这个徐州一个地方5万户，哎，都是从穷的地方买来的吧？所以我说穷是一个问题，你穷买的人穷，卖的人穷，拐骗的人是吧？邪恶。
Oh, what's that standing in the background?
Yo,
How's it going?
trying my best here.
Okay, we have a visitor.
Really in focus, eh?
Oh, well, here we go. Speak to the mic.
So, hey guys, so the lore, you're probably not watching the chat.
Oh, wait. Oh, okay, yeah,
The
sorry.
lore is that I was captured by CGTN to become a media challenger. And my media is currently being challenged in the closet with Xi Jinping, apparently.
Okay.
And you are the one that sold me out for Qingdao. So it's gotten pretty deep.
It sounds correct, though.
Yeah. Anyway, I got spinal surgery, and I'm pretty much fully recovered, totally fine. I can walk, I can run, jump, but I can't sit. So this will be the week that I won't be here. I will let Creepy Milk take over, and I will moderate chat, and I'm in there chatting to you guys. But you don't have to wish me a recovery. I'm fine now. But next week I'll be able to sit for an extended period of time, so I'll be back to normal.
Good. I'm
Cool.
glad.
All right.
Cool. See you
ya.
later. All right. See ya.
Bring back Creep.
Great. Just what I want is him staring over my shoulder. But anyway, okay, good stuff.
right,
See you later. Anyway, guys, I want to get back to that clip we just watched from Taiwan TV. For those of you who are perhaps listening to the podcast, it probably didn't make sense to you if you can't speak Chinese. But the host of the show was really just riling on mainland China. How are we supposed to take a country seriously if they allow such evil, uncivilized things to happen? And it's quite crazy. If you follow this story, they keep doubling down, this very blatant situation. And it's just gotten out of hand because, it turns out one of the missing girls that they think this woman is, because she was obviously kidnapped and human trafficked, is the daughter of a PLA army veteran. So the local government doesn't want to release the DNA results because they don't want people to find out, because if it is actually her, then they'll have problems with the PLA. There's a whole bunch of crap going on, but the local government keeps defending this human trafficking situation. It's ridiculous. And yes, China continuously claims, when I say China, by the way, let me put this to rest. When I say China, I mean the Chinese government, all right? When people say America bombs Syria, they're not saying the bus driver that drives the kids to school bombed Syria, right? They say the American administration, the American government. So let's put that to rest. When I say, China responds, I'm talking about the government. But, the fact that China goes out there and praises the fact that they have a 5,000-year history and that they're so great and sending probes to the moon and all that, they continuously overlook these really, really bad things that are happening in rural China, which is part of China, and it's a systemic problem. It's a problem that you find all over the rural parts of China. Human trafficking, kidnapping, all sorts of nonsense like this. And these are very important issues that they constantly gloss over. So paying attention to what happens with this situation with the mother of 8 is really important, because it will show you what the Chinese government, how it operates. Because it's gotten so much attention, not only domestically, but of course internationally as well, that they've kind of been backed into a corner. And even with this huge amount of pressure and scrutiny and everybody calling for proper action to be taken, they still sidestep responsibility. They still do not want to resolve this properly. It could be done in a minute. All they need to do, go take a DNA test, find out if she is one of these missing relatives that people claim that she is, and resolve the situation. Lock the guy up who has been raping her for years. And it wasn't just him, it was also his son and someone else who's kind of being used as a sex slave, basically. It's an awful situation. Anyway, this situation, this particular one is just one of many of these things that happen in China. And by focusing on it, we'll be able to really see how the Chinese government operates. And we should be looking at that rather than at the Olympic Games, to be honest. Because the Olympic Games does not represent China. It doesn't represent how China works. All it represents is how the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda works. So you can look at it from that point of view. But if you want to see the real China and the issues that China really faces, look at it. Look at this mother of 8 story. Anyway, now we've got to get back to the Olympics, unfortunately. But this is going to be in our main segment. And before we do that, I'm going to have to answer a couple of super chats. So there are a couple of chats that came in before the show, and I'm going to go through them quickly. So here we go. Quinn F says, what will we learn about West Taiwan today? Well, still remains to be seen. Charles Womack says, has the CCP infiltrated the Canadian trucker protests? If so, would they play both sides in order to inflame the situation? No, but they certainly are jumping on this whole situation to use it as a propaganda win for China, to say, look how great China is compared to the CCP. A.W. Jia says, 知道就说知道，不知道就说不知道. Oh, this is a tongue twister. It's like, if you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know. Blah, blah, blah. Nice, thanks. Appreciate it. Cesario GPN says, someone pointed out CCP communism was different from Soviet communism during the outrage over a Utah journalist trying to shame Canadian Freedom Convoy donors. Do you know the differences offhand? Well, yeah, Chinese communism isn't communism at all. It's like they say, it's communism with Chinese characteristics, which basically means whatever they want it to be. Because there are no real socialist programs in China. Some of them exist on paper, but it really is a fend for yourself type of a situation. We can go into it in more depth in an episode which we can really just focus on that, because it's a big fallacy. You know, you see communist China, you see the hammer and sickles, but all it is basically a dictatorship, an authoritarian government with an underlying capitalist, crony capitalism and protectionist kind of an economy. It's a weird situation. Anyway, a Fu King Archer says, if you ever want to break from people, I recommend a trip to MI's Up, probably Michigan's Up. You guys would love Yooper culture. Kind, humble people who love nature and hard work. I mean, those are my kind of people, to be honest. I grew up in South Africa, kind of on the farms and that sort of thing. So that's cool. Thank you. Okay. We have a Jinwan Ni for $5. Okay. Says, the channel Crux on YouTube is a cesspool of Wumao. The Viper's nest of vapid nonsense in the comment section, like bots responding to themselves. Matthew and Winston say something to prove you're Chinese. Well, that's not going to happen. And Lightseeker, thank you very much, says, regarding knee-jerk whataboutism / deflection, are PRC subjects and diaspora Chinese insecure about how bad the CCP is or how messed up the contemporary China is? Yeah, to a certain degree. We're going to get into that later on in our main segment. Free Speech Respecter says, would it be funny or terrifying if you two just eating out and drinking, having fun, chilling out, and out of nowhere you see Chinese ox videotaping you guys, but for him he's not going to run away? Yeah, that'd be terrifying. You know that footage of Chinese ox? For those of you who don't know, Chinese ox is this huge, very muscular, they call it Hei Shi Hui, which means mafia, gangster, with a massive gold chain and tattoos that I filmed in Beijing. And I tell you what, it was hair-raising, because in order to capture that footage, what I did was, the guy I was with, a friend of mine, is sitting across the table from me. So I said, okay, strike a pose. I pretended to film him, but what I was doing is I was actually off-frame filming Chinese ox and his friend circle of these really like terrifying looking mafia guys, because they all had their shirts off, they're all drinking baijiu, they're drunk as hell, and you know, one wrong move and that's it, tickets, you probably end up in the hospital or disappeared, right? So I'm just filming this, and I'm filming it, and one of his friends turns around and looks at the camera, and that's when I just like quickly put the camera down, pretending to check settings, and I managed to avoid it. They didn't talk to me or anything, but that was one of the most difficult clips that I've had to film in China. More difficult than filming, like, I don't know, a military station or something, or a military base, you know, because that's something you don't want to mess with. Anyway, we'll do one more because we're almost at the end of these ones, and we'll move on to our main segment. Okay. Frederick York says, what's the dumbest commie policy you guys were subjected to living in China? Something that made you want to go, what the ballsack? Oh, but there are some weird things, you know. I was warned once, because I was with my girlfriend at the time. We were going to book into a hotel. I was warned once that unmarried couples are not allowed to stay in the same hotel room together. And I was like, this can't be true. And I looked it up, but it actually was still the law, just not followed. You know, things like that. It's some weird things going on. Anyway, you did mention ball sacks. All right. Last one. David Lopan. Whatever the CCP's flavor of Shaoxing Roe is, I'm certain they put Lao Gun Ma on it. Yep. P.S. I'll post the timestamp shortly after the episode. Thank you. And Crabman, thank you very much, says, hey, Winston, when are you going to man up and propose to Sea Milk? Sorry, I'm already married, so that's not going to happen. All right, let's get back to the show. We're going to move on to Soft Power Hour, where we talk about how the Chinese government is influencing you. And this is a perfect example, everybody. Take a look at this. So I think we're all very aware of the fact that China employs a massive internet troll army. It's sometimes called the 50 Cent Army. And it doesn't just it's not just composed of actual employees of the state, but it's also composed of what they call zigang wumao, which are self-motivated 50 centers. In other words, a volunteer army. And it's very effective. Think about it, right? Everybody relies on the internet these days. People rely on the internet for their news and for the information, and they're constantly scrolling and reading. I mean, think about it. It's almost like it's become a pandemic of itself. Like all people do are scrolling through their TikToks and Instagram and stuff. I don't want to sound like a boomer here, but it does get a bit much, you know, and people rely too much on what they take in from the internet. And so when you've got such a huge population like China has of 1.4 billion, which is probably more, by the way, than that, because remember we spoke about hukou. People that don't have a hukou, they don't turn up on those sensors, they don't turn up in the data. And so there's probably more than 1.4 billion people in China, to be fair. You got such a massive population, okay? Your 50 Cent Army, that small percentage of the population that are, first of all, volunteer 50 Cent Army, and that small population of the, the small percentage of population that you hire to be a 50 Cent Army is going to be bigger than the population of most countries, right? I mean, just to put it into perspective, the city that I used to live in China, Shenzhen, the population, when I was living there, was about went between 16 and 21 million people in one city. That's more than Australia's entire population. Australia only has, 17 odd million people. So if one city can have more population than the whole of Australia, think about it. Your 50 Cent Army has a population bigger than any given small country out there, okay? And all they do is go out there and muddy the waters with misinformation, disinformation, attacking posts that they see as anti-China, boosting posts that they see as pro-China, and it's very effective. Like I said, because the algorithms of YouTube and Twitter and so on, they respond to things like, for instance, upvotes and shares. When a specific post is being upvoted and shared a lot, what they'll do is they'll boost that post because it looks like, oh, this is a popular post. More people are going to want to see it. So they boost it and they put it out there. They do the same on YouTube, of course. And so it's very easy for this 50 Cent Army and volunteer army to get the message they want out there on the front page across the world, and the messages they don't want, in other words, anything critical of the Chinese Communist Party, to be kind of shadow banned and pushed down and pushed out of the way. It affects us a lot here on ADV Podcast, ADV China, and of course our own personal channels, but it affects the narrative all around, and we're going to take a look. What you're seeing behind here is an account called Spicy Panda that's on Twitter. Of course, Twitter, that lovely website that everyone kind of doesn't like but still uses and feels terrible after using it. So Spicy Panda is a propaganda account. It's very straightforward. I'll play you a little bit of what they do in the background so you can... Wrong mouse again, give me a second. So you can see what's going on. All right, so straight away you can see it's just praising Chinese culture and attacking Western culture a lot and attacking the West a lot. But you're going to see there's something very interesting about this specific account. All right, yeah, see, celebrating all this stuff, celebrating look at all the great volunteer work that's being done. Look at how amazing the venues look from specific angles that don't show the bad parts. Yeah, look, here's a Chinese taikonaut in space. What's this about the suddenly being thrown in there? What's this about the U.S., the Afghan people, you see, and how America's bad and attacks Afghan... Hang on a second, what is this? Now, here's where you got to pay attention. Okay. Turns out that this particular account has been artificially boosted by over 3,000 fake accounts and bot accounts. Actually, the New York Times did a piece on this, which is pretty good to read, if you can get past their stupid paywalls. Basically, it was found that around 3,000 accounts, all which were only created after December 1st of last year, and with no followers and so on, were just reposting the tweets from this particular Spicy Panda account, and of course just liking and resharing and doing all the algorithm boosting stuff. But of course the accounts themselves were just nonsense, fake accounts, bot accounts, and this is what the Chinese Communist Party does a lot. They utilize Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. They utilize that as a propaganda tool, even though it's blocked in mainland China. They know it's effective, and they know that's the way to control the narrative in the West, is to take advantage of Western social media. And unfortunately, unlike in China, Western social media is very open and allows anybody to join. Whereas in China, they block you out. If you've got a foreign IP address and you try to, for instance, create a Weibo account, it's impossible. You go try create a Weibo account now. It's going to ask you for your Chinese ID. It's going to see you from an outside IP, and it's going to take you to this passport.weibo.com page, and it's going to basically prevent you from creating an account. Whereas Twitter, fairly easy. All you need to do is create an email account on any given service or anything like that, or have a burner phone or whatever. You could create accounts all you want, and they take advantage of this. But now you're seeing this Ai Chongqing because Spicy Panda has been retweeting a lot of Ai Chongqing stuff. Now, for those of you who don't know what Ai Chongqing is, well, we have a little bit of a history with Ai Chongqing here on ADV Podcasts and ADV Media in general. Ai Chongqing is one of the government propaganda arms that hires the CCP shills. You know, these immoral Westerners that work as propaganda mouthpieces for the Chinese government. Ai Chongqing is instrumental in hiring a lot of them, and they actually started a lot of the shill activities by bringing them over to, promote Chongqing, because that's what Ai Chongqing was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the tourism board of the Chongqing mega city, So let me break it down for you very quickly. Specific regions and specific cities around China have, in fact all of them have, but they have a propaganda department for that specific city. And that propaganda department's job is to make that city more attractive for investment, for travel, that kind of thing, right? So what they've been doing for many years, and I've been invited on these as well for many, many years. I haven't actually ever gone on any of these things because I know what they're all about. But they invite influencers, especially foreign influencers, to go there, and they take them on these kind of guided tours, and they take them to all the tourist hotspots, and the influencers, be they Instagrammers or YouTubers or you name it. What they do is they go and film the thing, and they show how great it is and show how wonderful the area is. But on top of that, they always throw in political propaganda talking points. So it's not just about, hey, we're going to go and see this village. It's going to be something like, we're going to go and see this village where the government has lifted everybody out of poverty and built infrastructure. Oh, look at the high-speed rail. Look at this amazing cashless payment or whatever. There's always political propaganda built into these things. So Ai Chongqing started out as one of those things, right? Where they just bring in the foreigners to show how great Chongqing is in the surrounding areas. It has now elevated itself, probably because they started this whole shill thing, mind you, them and CRI, has kind of elevated itself into like a foreign shill handler and just a foreign propaganda mouthpiece for the Chinese government. That's why, if we go back here, you'll see that they're not talking about Chongqing. They're talking about Beijing Olympics, the media and the truth, right? Now, that's got nothing to do with Chongqing, okay? Neither do a lot of the articles that they put out these days. A lot of the articles they put out these days, they have these guys or other foreigners in them trying to debunk Western lies or whatever the case. So Ai Chongqing, everybody, is another one of those organizations we need to put high up on the list, along with CGTN and other state-run media organizations like CRI, China Radio International, and of course CCTV and all that kind of crap. It's basically just a propaganda mouthpiece for the outside now, okay, where they have English language content in order to try and spread the Chinese propaganda. So be careful. This is what Soft Power Hour is all about, is to educate all of you guys out there what to watch out for when it comes to things coming out of the Chinese government. So when you see Ai Chongqing, you can discount it as just being pure propaganda. So what's the point of all this? Well, it proves that the Spicy Panda account, which should just be called Panda Bear, you know, as in a Pander. Spicy Panda account is simply, again, the Chinese government arm of, well, it's propaganda. Why else would they be constantly tweeting out Ai Chongqing content? Well, it's pretty obvious. They're linked to Ai Chongqing, right? Which is the government. Ai Chongqing is the government. It's not like anything other than just the government. And it's there to whitewash any kind of criticism of the Olympics. And it's there to boost the narrative that nothing but an amazing event has happened now. You will not find a single bit of criticism at all. Every single post that you find on this is all about like how amazing everything in the Olympics has been. Even the like nuclear power station disgusting venue that they used for the event, in here they're like saying, oh, it just shows you how amazing it's renewable and it's clean energy, that we're reusing this, all that kind of nonsense. So the reason it's important is that we can see the Chinese soft power machine in operation here. They create this Spicy Panda account, which is actually just connected directly to Ai Chongqing, but it's supposed to appear as if it's some kind of an independent account that's just putting out news and information about the Olympics, because I guess that's what people like to do in their spare time. It's then boosted artificially by thousands and thousands of fake Twitter accounts and fake social media accounts. All right, so this kind of stuff that they're putting out here, all this fluff about how great the Olympics is and how bad the West is, because look, it's not just promoting how amazing everything is. At the same time, they keep talking about how bad America is with Afghanistan and all these weird political cartoons about how the West and how the USA is bad. So it's very blatantly obvious what it is, right? It's not just, hey, the Olympics are great. It's like, wow, China's great. Wow, look how bad the West is. That goes out there, that gets boosted, and you're just scrolling through Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and you start to see these things popping up, and it might sway you. But you wouldn't be seeing this content if it wasn't artificially boosted by the Chinese government and its bot army and its 50-cent army. So yeah, as you can see there, those kind of political cartoons that they keep putting up there. Kind of transparent what they're trying to do here. Anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about that. The Chinese 50-cent army, the title of this particular show, is their troll army is going into overdrive, not just here, but on various different fronts. And I wanted to move into something that's a little bit more realistic, like a real world 50 Cent army, so to speak. And we're going to move into that now. Let me just find that little clip for you. You need to get out of here. This is just creeping me out. That's why it's called Creepy Milk. How about you just bugger off for a minute. Get out of here. Like, all the way out of here. Yeah, I want to see even a little bit of you there. Okay. By the way, for those of you interested, what you're seeing in the background here is a COVID testing station in Beijing, where people line up to get tested for COVID. I don't know if you guys agree with me, but as far as this is concerned, I feel like it's kind of a bad situation. If people are lining up to get tested to see whether or not they have COVID, surely they shouldn't be standing, cheek to jowl and breathing on each other. I mean, sure, they're wearing masks and stuff, but I think it kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? Stand in a crowded queue for a very long time, right next to other people that potentially have COVID. Anyway, that's a story for another day. Let me find our next segment. Now we're going to go to Australia here for a second. Australia, because Australia is so awesome. Yeah, seriously, it is. I like Australia a lot. I'm going to play you a little clip here, and we're going to talk about it. So let's get into it.
Your camera has been on.
Yeah, and I've just
you
been
are ruining
filming.
my liberty.
No,
I don't want
I'm
to
allowed
show
to film
my
here.
face. I don't want to show my face. I just want to show that I'm not show my freedom.
Yeah, I understand that, and I will blur out your face, right? But can you tell me a bit about why you think it's right to rip these down?
I don't think I'm right, but you think you are right to tell these lies to the students, especially those teenagers?
I don't think that they all are lies. I mean, I
You
don't know that any of them are lies.
And
Can
I
you
think
point to
you
a
have
specific
the-
one that is?
And I think you have the time to figure out what's lying to prove to
What about
And
this
I-
one here? The picture of the tanks.
Tanks?
Are you aware of what happened then?
Do you know Australia has
The massacre in Tiananmen Square? Do you know much about that?
No, I don't know that about that because I haven't been born. It happened
Yeah.
just 14 to 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, I get that. But see, in some other countries,
Why do
and in
you
Australia
about
certainly.
things happened decades ago? I'm just
Yeah,
thinking
I
about
get
now.
that.
I'm just thinking about the future, the students, the teenagers. What will they be influenced by this war?
I think the intent is to make them think twice about what's
About what?
happening
About what?
in the Xinjiang province in East Turkestan. There
I
are
will show you
Uyghur
what
Muslims.
Xinjiang is looking now, and I will show you what China is looking like. I just want to say, I think I appreciate your attitude about thinking twice, but I think I have the right to tell you the truth. You always told us that you are telling the truth, and I felt that, and I think that you are telling lies.
I think that the truth is a difficult thing sometimes, so certainly I'd be happy to hear your perspective. But as far as I'm aware, there are Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps in that province
Concentration camps.
on account of nothing else.
Do you
other
have
than their
jails? Do you
religion.
have jails in Australia? Do you have jails in Australia?
Certainly we do.
Okay, let's break that down a bit. This is actually quite a common occurrence. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lenin walls, but this is something that sprung up pretty much with the whole Hong Kong, democracy movement, the umbrella movement. And this is a common occurrence. What happens is people put up a Lenin wall, which is a bunch of post-it notes, a bunch of posters talking about the struggles for democracy in Hong Kong. It's usually about the Hong Kong struggle. And they'll put up things like the CCP, end the CCP, CCP rule of Hong Kong, that kind of thing, and freedom of democracy. And what we often see, like I'll show you another quick clip in the background here. I'll keep myself in. We can see here's a mainland student destroying a Lenin wall in the University of Hong Kong and throwing over the goddess of freedom and stuff. It's very common, and I've got a whole library of these clips. I didn't have time to put them all in here, but it's very common to see this happening in Canada and happening in Australia and anywhere where you've got they'll have a free or Hong Kong democracy gathering or protest or anything. you will get mainland international students coming and destroying these exhibitions, just tearing them down. And as you can see, just vandalizing them. And it's heartbreaking. And it's actually kind of easy to understand why it happens, because in mainland China, you may not talk about these things. You may not criticize the government. You may not ever say a bad thing about the government. You're not allowed to talk about Tiananmen Square. You're not allowed to talk about the sensitive issues of Xinjiang and what have you. So when they see other people talking about these things, to them, it's like, this is forbidden. You may not talk about this. You have no right to talk about this. We don't have a right to talk about this. You don't have a right to talk about this. And they go crazy. And they attack people, and they break things and destroy things and vandalize things. And you can see the mentality. Somebody, an international student, goes to Australia, and then kind of like the 50 Cent Army, the Zhigang Wu Mao, the volunteer 50 Cent Army, become a real-life version of that. And instead of trying to censor things on the internet, they try to censor things in real life by tearing down pictures and posters and breaking down statues and what have you. Because in their minds, it's impossible for anyone to ever criticize the Chinese government. It's not allowed, right? Doesn't matter where you are, in what country, but you can't do it because their entire upbringing, they've been brought up to believe that you're not allowed to do that kind of thing. However, if you look at the things she was saying, first of all, she was laughing about the idea of Uyghur concentration camps, which is, of course, very insensitive to Uyghur people. She was tearing down people's property. You're not allowed to do that, That's called vandalism. It's against the law in most places. And even more telling is when, by the way, the person who's talking, who filmed it, is our good friend Drew Pavlu in Australia. By the way, vote for him if you're Australian. When he spoke about Tiananmen Square, what did she say? Oh, that happened so long ago. 40, 50 years ago. Imagine we all took that attitude. Imagine somebody brings up the massacre of the Native Americans in Canada or something, and you're like, the Inuit or whatever, and you say, oh, that happened so long ago. Who cares about that? You're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to bring that up. Or apartheid. That happened so long ago. You're not allowed to talk about that. Shut up. I'm not going to allow you to put up posters about that, or not allowed to let you discuss that type of thing. You see, it's ridiculous, this attitude that happens. And we're going to get on to Wu Mao Corner, which, by the way, is part of this whole thing. It's kind of a segue, because I've got a fantastic one for you, and it's going to show you exactly how the Chinese Communist Party has successfully managed to stop a lot of criticism when it comes to the Chinese government and its bad behavior, specifically around things like the destruction of democracy in Hong Kong, and, of course, the Tiananmen Square massacre, and any number of their sensitive issues. But before we do that, I'm going to have to answer a super chat or two. So let's get into it quickly. So Christoph Baran says, by the way, thank you to Mateusz Telewski. Thank you for joining us. So Christoph says, where can I find a full list of my 2022 banned words? With a bit of software and AI engineering, I could create something interesting. I actually have a link to that list of banned words in my video. So if you go to my video, the one before last, you'll be able to see there's a link to the raw text file in the description. Logo app says, oh no, Chinese ox got to see milk. Well, yeah, that's why he had to have spinal, surgeries, because Chinese ox got a hold of him and roughed him up a bit too much. Episode 2, Return of Creep Milk. Yes, finally caught you live. Thanks for joining me today, guys, or joining us, I suppose. And I apologize for Sea Milk not being here yet again, but, life seems to throw these situations where I have to host the channel solo. So it seems to happen a lot. We'll see in the future. Maybe it'll be Sea Milk's turn one day. I'll see how he fares. We'll have to make a creepy serpent today. Let's move on. Looks like China won't be adding Taiwan and Hong Kong medals to supposedly come first in its own Olympics. Serves them right for pulling that trick. And that was by Jerry Huang. And Logo App says, Eileen seems like such a narcissist. Well, of course she is. She's a... what did they say? That she's made $45 million out of this whole sponsorship stuff. She's a multi-millionaire. She's studying at Stanford. She's rich. She's got connected parents. She's a world-class Olympic athlete. Of course she's going to be narcissistic. And there's nothing wrong with being rich and connected and being a good athlete. In fact, that's something everybody should strive towards. But what's wrong is the moral aspect of what she's doing. Because she very well knows what she's doing. She's an adult. She's very well traveled. And this whole excuse of that, oh, she's just a young teenager who doesn't understand what she's doing is a bunch of bollocks. Of course she knows what she's doing. She speaks Chinese fluently. She speaks English fluently. She has multiple citizenships and passports. And like I said, anyone who's traveled as much as she has, anyone who's, as rich as she is and as connected as she is, she knows what's going on. She's not a fool. She's not a dumb, like hick from a redneck area who's never seen anything other than their own little town. So just remember that next time you make that comparison. Okay, George, the Mandalore says, finally got to catch you live. Greetings from Moldovan living in Greetings from a Moldovan living in Norway, and thanks for all the amazing and dangerous work. Love China, hate the CCP, and thank you very much for that. All right, guys, we're going to move on to Wu Mao Corner. Now, Wu Mao Corner is directly related to that clip that you just saw of the Australian international student tearing down the Lenin Wall in Australia. And I've got to say, I'm incredibly disappointed at how these incidents have been handled in the past. No one ever seems to be taken to task. Usually surrounding universities, look what happened to Drew Pavlou. He was attacked in his group of little, activists, you could call them, were just there doing a protest against Beijing. And guess what? They got attacked physically. And this happens. These ultra-nationalist so-called international students are in fact, and not all of them, of course, but the ultra-nationalist ones are really just enforcers for Chinese censorship. They are agents of the Chinese government. The actual international students who are there to learn and study and to respect the host country, they're great. They're wonderful. Probably some of the best people you'll meet, some of the best students, but they're never very outspoken about politics simply because they know the trouble it can get them into. But these Chinese Students and Scholars Associations, Confucius Institutes, Chinese Culture Association, Chinese this and that all get involved on campus, and all those crazy ultranationalists that go there and tear down the Lenin walls and go and boycott and try to stop speeches by the Dalai Lama or by anyone who wants to put on a Taiwan food stall or whatever, those guys and those girls are really just agents of the Chinese Communist Party. And I hate the fact that they don't get taken to task. And I understand it because a lot of these universities rely on international students as a big revenue stream. So they don't want to piss the Chinese international student bodies off too much because they don't want to lose that revenue. But at the same time, they're more than happy to just destroy all semblance of freedom of speech and expression on campus when it comes to Chinese issues, or China issues, I should say, like the CCP issues. But everything else is fair game. You can have a Black Lives Matter wall. You can have any kind of wall you want. You can have a hate Biden wall, a hate Trump wall, or a hate this wall, or Canadians are terrible because of XYZ wall, or whatever you want. But when it comes to China, a China thing, nope, not allowed. Anyway, so let's get back to this. This I found quite funny and interesting at the same time. Let me just bring it up for you here in the background. Here. Let me start this up. So, forgive me for reading out a Twitter thread. I know it's not the most professional thing to do, but we're going to do it anyway. I wrote and I shared this whole thing because Drew Pavlou over there, he actually tweeted out this video that he took, of course, of this person ripping down the Lenin Wall. So I said, it's the truth that hurts Chinese feelings the most. That's what happens if you grow up being fed lies by the CCP. And it is true. Chinese people are incredibly resilient. I've seen that myself. They have a almost uncanny ability to 吃苦, as they say, which means to eat bitter, in other words, to suffer. And throughout Chinese history, the people of China have had to endure some of the worst dictators and emperors and, you name it, and some of the worst conditions. Just having to survive. If you know about Chinese history, you'll know that this is all true, that the Chinese people are incredibly resilient. And all the Chinese friends that I've made throughout the years are incredibly resilient. But one thing that seems to always trigger a knee-jerk response is when there's any kind of criticism of the CCP, but I'm not talking about unfounded criticism. I'm not talking about somebody just saying like, oh, CCP is dumb, they suck. It's like when people just want to talk about the Tiananmen Square massacre, for instance, or the occupation of Tibet, and even just talk about it, not even say it's wrong, just start to talk about these issues, or talk about the Uyghur situation, or the Hong Kong democracy protests, or anything that's sensitive. You get a knee-jerk reaction, especially because of the nationalist education. The Chinese government has put so much time, effort, and resource into making sure that what they have done in the past is correct, even when it's not correct, that you get this knee-jerk nationalist response. And so the truth surrounding these particular events hurts the feelings of the Chinese people the most. Because you know what? The truth hurts, and the truth cuts like a knife. We all know that. We all know that. So I put this out, and here's the important part, is the response that I got from a specific person who seems reasonable, by the way. And I was taking them as a reasonable person in the beginning. But they say, sometimes it feels like a lot of generalizations about Asians living abroad stem from the high amount of negative coverage about China and its government. It's sad that people still can't separate the two. It's even sadder when Asians feel they need to defend China. See what they're doing here? It's very clever. It's a little trick. What does this post, by the way, about a Lenin Wall talking about Tiananmen Square and Hong Kong, by the way, which also, Hong Kongers are Asians, by the way, and Hong Kong democracy and freedom is being torn down by a mainland Chinese student, right? How does this suddenly become Asians, right? How and what Asians are defending China as well? That's another thing that's ridiculous. Like when Asians feel they need to defend China. No Asian is defending China. There's not a Japanese person up there going like, Tiananmen Square didn't happen. You can't show this. You can't talk about Hong Kong democracy. There's not a Filipino up there doing that. There's not a Hong Konger or a Taiwanese person who are ethnically Chinese up there doing that, right? What Asians is this person talking about? There are no Asians defending this. That is not an random Asian person. That is a mainland Chinese student tearing this down. So they're trying to muddy the waters. So I simply replied by saying, it's not Asians, it's mainland Chinese freaking out since they're not used to freedom of expression. They can't accept that anyone meant to say that anyone can criticize the CCP since it's not allowed in China. So they resort to petty vandalism and property destruction. Okay? To which he replies, I get that's the video, but there's a lot Asian discrimination going on all over the place. Just making a general statement. Okay? See, again, sounding fairly reasonable, but at the same time, it's not reasonable if you think about the fact that they've changed the narrative of the initial post, which is the end goal. I said, sure, but when it comes to getting angry, destructive, and violent, when people put up Lenin walls regarding democracy and denouncing the CCP's brutal actions, it's not Asians, it's only mainland Chinese nationalists. And do you see, I make the distinction between mainland Chinese people and mainland Chinese nationalists because there are plenty of reasonable mainland Chinese people who would not go tear down that wall. You know? To the reply. Realistically, at this point, any nationalist can be destructive, not limited to China. I understand that this is the main concern for you. With that said, a lot of people abroad see nationalist Chinese and other Asians as the same thing. The stigma covers all Asians. All right? See where this is going? So I reply, no, these are issues directly related to China and the CCP only, and don't concern other Asians. Please show me an example of anyone other than a mainland Chinese nationalist tearing down a pro-democracy Hong Kong Lenin Wall. Muddying of the water is what you are doing. To which they said, all right, that's that then, muddy waters. To which I replied, we can get there. It's what the CCP wants, to use people like you to deflect criticism away from the CCP issues by trying to make it a race thing. Pathetic that people fall for it. So, this person then went on to, I'll finish this and then I'll tell you what happened after. He says, all right, because you're ranting about whatever getting your views and likes is helping whom, that's all right. It's you. Keep that cash flow rolling in, no matter where in. Is it California that you're in? ? So, true colors exposed. This is a Wu Mao. First of all, coming into the whole thing, I'm just trying to make views. I'm just trying to make money out of smearing China or saying bad things about China. And then, I don't know if this is an attempt to dox my location. Am I in California? Well, sorry, no. Pennsylvania is the correct answer to that. Although I am sometimes in California when I fly down there, or we go back and forth occasionally, so who knows. So, of course, my last comment there is proof you're just a Wu Mao. I'll use this thread in our podcast to show your methods of deflection, race baiting, and hatred. To which I got some nasty, insulting replies, and then the person deleted all of their tweets when they realized that I was going to show them. Too bad, I already recorded it, sorry. Too late, you can't just do that kind of shit and then delete your tweets. Sorry, mate. But do you see what this is all about? A very succinct topic. A Lenin Wall being torn down by a mainland Chinese nationalist, and all of a sudden you get this deflection on behalf of the Chinese government, whether this person is a Chinese Wu Mao or a volunteer Wu Mao or a tanky or some kind of foreigner who's been taken in by the propaganda. Either way, it all works very well, because look what it devolved into. Race baiting. Oh, I can't criticize this person for tearing down this Lenin Wall because it reflects badly on all Asians, and all Asians are under attack and blah, blah, blah. You're just racist, basically, is the end of this conversation that they're going for. And you see how effective this could be. If they tried this on just a casual person commenting on this, the average person might back off because they are afraid of the racist label or being afraid of the woke mob coming after them. Well, guess what? Piss off. I don't give a shit. I know Asian people, and I know when I'm talking about mainland Chinese nationalists destroying other Asian people's Lenin Walls, by the way, because it was put up by Hong Kong students. It's not put up by white people or black people. It's put up by other Asians. I know the difference between mainland Chinese people and Koreans and Japanese and Taiwanese and Hong Kongese and Singaporeans and Indians and you name it. Give me an Asian nationality and I'll be able to tell you a lot about their history, their culture, and I can tell you the differences between them and mainland Chinese people. And the difference is that mainland Chinese people have glass hearts, the nationalists, not all of them, but it's due to their education. They have glass hearts which shatter whenever the truth is spoken, and they resort to violence, and they tear down these walls, these Lenin walls, and they attack any criticism of the CCP. That is the difference. So, Wu Mao, thank you for showing the rest of the world how the CCP operates and how it silences any kind of discussion around these issues by throwing out the race card. We talked about it last week when Badiu Cao, the Chinese artist, had his posters removed because of a similar thing where the dean of the university was contacted and told that the posters were racist. And immediately he started an investigation and got the posters taken down because he was so afraid of the whole racist thing. And the sooner we realize that being anti-CCP is being anti-Asian hate, the better it's going to be, because it's the CCP that hate Asians the most. The Chinese Communist Party is actually responsible for more Asian deaths than anyone else. Great leap forward, great leap backwards, cultural devolution, tens of millions of people starved to death. We've had them attacking Vietnam. We've had all sorts of nonsense going on in the past. When it comes to being Asian, Taiwanese constantly under threat by the CCP, threat of a military attack. When it comes to Hong Kong, their entire democracy has been destroyed and the promises of having autonomy for 50 years shattered by the Communist Party of China. You know who hates Asians? The CCP, that's who. And yet they've managed to turn these well-meaning, useful idiots, or their paid trolls or whatever it is into this machine that's managed to twist the narrative on its head and say that any criticism of the Communist Party of China is racist because suddenly Asians. Bullshit. Don't buy it. Don't stay silent when you see a comment like that. And now you know. That's Woomar Corner. So, guys, we've got Worldview coming up still. Or, in fact, no, we don't. We've still got a little bit more. Sorry, my mistake. I wanted to give you a little bit of a background here because I have a personal history with the Umbrella Revolution. In 2014, I was there taking footage in Hong Kong. All right, now, I didn't take as much footage as I would have liked to. There's me in 2014 at the barricades and so on. You have to understand that at the time, there's a Lenin Wall for you, by the way. Let's go back to that, because some of you might still not understand what a Lenin Wall is. That's... oh, sorry, it was back a little bit. Sorry. I'll pause it at the right place. That is a Lenin Wall. And you may have seen these pop up at universities around the world, etc. But this is when, people can write down little thoughts about like, stay strong, be free, like democracy is, we need freedom, we need democracy, that kind of crap. And they stick them all on a wall like this. And, you'll also get art put up there, and you'll get posters and various other things related to democracy and freedom. And these Lenin walls are the arch enemy of Chinese ultranationalists, the arch enemy of Chinese international students who are working to censor on behalf of the CCP. You ever want to draw them out? Start a Lenin wall. Because you know what? Freedom of speech is enshrined in the constitution of many countries, even South Africa, where I'm from. As long as you don't criticize the communist, overlords, the ANC. But you can still do it. You probably get sued by Jacob Zuma or something, like he did to that political cartoonist when he drew a picture of him with a shower on his head. He actually got sued for defamation by the president. It was kind of funny. But anyway, this is a Lenin Wall. So having been there and been a part of this movement initially in 2014, I was silent about it at the time since I was still living in mainland China, and I could not film as much as I wanted to because I was paranoid and afraid. Some photos I took here. I was paranoid and afraid that going back into mainland China over the border, because I was only there for a day or two, and then, I've got all these files on my camera, and if I go in and they find and they search my camera, because they do that sometimes, they'll pull you aside, especially when there's sensitive events going on, I could have gotten into serious trouble. And at that time, my entire life was still in mainland China. I was just about to film Conquering Southern China, my documentary, which we filmed in 2015. I had a lot of plans and I couldn't jeopardize them all, so I didn't film as much as I had hoped I could film. But I was actually there as a part of the Umbrella movement, and I saw it in action, and I saw it was a beautiful thing. And so when I see the same spirit of the Hong Kong international students abroad trying to do the same thing that they did back then, which is to show democracy and show exactly how important it is to them, and just how important this whole movement is to them, and how they're losing their freedoms is such a devastating thing. It hurts, it hurts to see. Now, myself and Seamilk went to one of these Hong Kong gatherings in California in 2019, and even there we saw communist spies, as we like to call them, taking photos of everyone. You could tell who it was, trying to find out the identity of the people there. And we spoke to them, and I gave a speech to the crowd and everything like that. So it's a very near and dear and personal topic for me. And when I see them the nationalists tearing down those Lenin walls, it really pisses me off. And then to try to be called racist, or that I'm painting Asians with a bad brush, or we're painting Asians with a bad brush because Asians, as in mainland Chinese, tearing down Hong Kong Asian people's work, it makes me mad because it's so stupid, and it's such a underhanded, petty mechanism to try and deflect any sort of criticism away from the CCP and the Chinese Communist Party. It makes me crazy. So, yeah, I'm sorry if I went on about this a little too long, but I just wanted to get that point across to you, that this is what's going on, and this is the conversation, how it starts and how happens on the internet. So I guess it's time for me to answer some super chats. I'm just going to let that run in the background. And then we'll move on to our final section, World News. So, okay. We've got a message retracted. And then Philip says, hey guys, I recently heard about Chabador culture and how it's prevalent in China, especially in construction. Any insights into the origins of this? We've talked about that quite a bit, especially on ADVChina. If you look at our videos about Chinese buildings falling down and so on, we've got a couple of big ones on there. I suggest you look at it. But Chabador just means like, it's good enough. And it does. It's a big part of Chinese culture. And I guess it stems from the whole fact that, during the communist reign, and even before that, the way the emperors kind of reigned, the way it led the country, it's good enough to just get something done. Personal pride in your work is not really a thing because nothing really belongs to you. When it comes to a building, for instance, you never own the building. You just own your little apartment, but the actual land is not yours and the outside of the building is not yours. And so there's no incentive to put effort into maintaining and looking after something or making it look nice, because at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything for you. All you end up doing is wasting your time and energy, and someone else destroys it, or you just benefit someone else. So Chabador kind of stems from those roots. Kathleen Morrison says, Winston, you and Creepy Milk are doing a great job today. Well, thank you very much. Actually, I'll bring him back in. I was a bit harsh to old Creepy Milk. There he is. Wow, you lost weight. Okay. He's back. All right. Next one. Black Halo 6. Bet on Sea Milk being on chat while taking mad dump. I have no idea. He can't really sit down, so I actually don't know how he's dealing with that, to be honest. Because you're either standing up or lying down with that recovery he's got going on, or almost done with. So I don't know how that works. Maybe someone who works in the medical field can explain. New News Network says, long time no live show. Please accept my humble contribution. All the best from Vienna. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us live. David Brooks. Winston, if you could turn back time, would you still go to China or keep that lovely Japanese satin? All those wonderful Japanese imports, man. I actually got my Japanese imported satin in China. But if I could turn back time, you have, I think all of us have this battle with ourselves. You think, if I could go back and just tell myself not to be stupid and not to do that one thing, then my life would be better. But you never know that, right? Because we are the sum of our experiences. And if I hadn't gone to China, I wouldn't be who I am today. So it's hard to tell. But one thing that I do kind of regret is not going to Taiwan instead of China. I missed out on a lot as far as Chinese culture is concerned, and, the things that I was actually interested in when it comes to Asia and Asian culture. Some goblin loser, IDK, says, Bing Chilling, great, we live in the fear.
We'll live in the fear.
All right. We're going to have plenty of time during Yamcha to go through these kind of things, guys. So I'm just going to do two more quickly. Sea Milk can't sit. Tongzhi. Jokes, lol, woot. Okay, cool. That's from Lightseeker. Black Holo 6 says, oh shit, now I feel bad. I hope it heals up super fast, Matt. And the host of that show is The Hammer, because he hit the nail on the head hard. Okay. Final one from David Brooks. Sea Milk, that level in Tomb Raider 1, Palace of Midas, is evil with the fire pillars and not knowing you're meant to turn the slabs into gold. Well, I appreciate your comment, but I got to correct you on your and your usage. You're meant to turn the slabs into gold is incorrect. You should say you're meant to turn the slabs into... Sorry, pet peeve of mine. I know. Just look it up. There's a big difference. For instance, you can't say you're an idiot. You have to say you're an idiot. Or you can say your grammar isn't great. You can't say your grammar isn't great. Make sense? And I'm not talking about an old person. I'm talking about the right. Anyway. No, I'm just joking. Of course, absolutely love you. Thank you so much for your contribution. Let's move on to worldview, shall we? Okay. A worldview where we talk about, and in this case, more like I talk about, the things that are happening in the world with regard to China. And I've got an interesting one for you here. Let me just bring it up. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to quickly show you a picture that I took during the 2014 umbrella movement, which was on a big road that had been shut down. And I just really liked this picture just because of the message. And for those of you who can't see it, it's written in chalk. It says, "I love Hong Kong. Hong Kong is not dying because of you," or here. So in other words, because of you, Hong Kong still has a chance. And that just really to me was a very important message. Let us take a look, everybody, at our international news. Now, this one it hits very close to home, and it's about Huawei. Now, Huawei is actually very popular in South Africa, where I'm from, okay? And it makes sense. South Africa is a third world developing country and has a very large low-income population. It's got a huge amount of unemployed people. I can't remember what the last statistics were, but it's absolutely ridiculous. It's, I don't know, it's something like 50% thereabouts. Correct me if I'm wrong. Might be more than that even. Let me just find this article, because I have an article here about it. It shows you my preparedness is not great for this one, I'm afraid. I'll bring it up in a second. Okay, here we go. Okay, currently 35% of South Africa's workforce is unemployed. Okay, it's less than I thought. 35%, that's not that much, right? If you think about it. Actually, it is a lot. And that's South Africa for you. And it's an awful situation for everybody involved. Because in order to combat this, the South African government has put into place a lot of affirmative action, black economic empowerment, and that sort of thing, which makes sense to make up for imbalances in the past. But it's one of the reasons I'm not there anymore, because the white people in South Africa make up a very small minority of, I don't even know, it's like 10% thereabouts, plus minus. And so you're a minority, and you're still at the receiving end of these policies. So if I go to apply for a job, for instance, and somebody who's not white applies for the same job, I'm out of luck. And considering that the majority of the population are not white, that means that I'm completely out of luck. So one of the reasons I left South Africa is because you either, at least if you're of my demographic, you either have to be a serious entrepreneur and start your own business, or that's it, really. It's like actual jobs to get are very few and far between. But now this also applies to foreign companies that come in there. The reason I'm going on about this, okay? So the regulations in South Africa, right? If you're a foreign company, you have to hire, I believe, at least a 40% local workforce. And this is part of these policies, right? However, it's now been found out that Huawei hires 90% of foreign nationals. In other words, 90% of their workforce are Chinese, right? And this is something that Africa needs to learn about China, is that Chinese companies will come in there and they will promise to build infrastructure, they'll promise to help the economy and create jobs is one of the big things. We're going to come in and we're going to create jobs. The problem is that's not true. Because when these big Chinese companies come in, construction companies, they're building roads or whatever, they end up bringing in labor from China, because don't forget, China has a massive job shortage problem too. There are a lot of unemployed people in China. There are a lot of people below the poverty line. So, of course, China wants to help out the Chinese economy. They don't want to help out foreign economies. So what they do is they bring in cheap labor, migrant laborers from China who end up being cheaper for them to bring in and work in the African countries, etc., than hiring locals. It actually does work out cheaper. And that's because Chinese labor, especially of the more rural people, is really cheap. I mean, I live there, I know, and that's why we get all our stuff manufactured there, right? Because of cheap labor. Cheap skilled labor. But when you're talking about unskilled labor, it's even cheaper in China. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. The fact of the matter is that big Chinese companies, when they do set up in Africa, they end up completely skirting all the laws, and well, I think they may have taken on the wrong kind of situation, because in South Africa, this work quota, this job quota thing is taken very seriously. It's not like most other places, I don't think. So anyway, I'm just going to read you verbatim from this article, if you don't mind, so that we can just get through this and you can understand. Okay, it says, the South African Department of Labor, maybe I should have a South African accent for this. The South African Department of Labor, no, I'm not going to do that, is suing the local unit of Chinese tech giant Huawei for hiring too many foreign workers, as the nation faces its highest levels of unemployment since the end of apartheid. Authorities allege that Huawei's SA workforce is 90% foreign, which far exceeds the nation's regulations that require foreign companies to employ at least 40% local workers, per Bloomberg. All 5 of Huawei's most senior executives are foreign nationals, as are 27 out of 71 of its top managers, 38%. Right. So, the move has increased scrutiny over the employment practices of Chinese firms in Africa, which previously has been under fire for favoring Chinese workers over local employees. We intend to go to other foreign-owned companies in the country so that it does not look like we are targeting one company, Fix Bede, a chief director in the Labor Department said. His name's Fix, by the way, like F-I-X, Fix. And that's quite common with African English names, so they can be quite literal. Just a bit of a sidetrack here. I grew up with a lot of African people, and I remember the one guy's name was Message, another guy's name was Gift, one guy's name was Manual, like as in an instruction manual. We've talked about some of these, but it's Precious. Dude, I got beat up. I got beat up in school by a black girl called Precious, and I'm not even kidding. She knocked me out solid. She's the most vicious, toughest person I've ever met in my life. She beat up the high school bully on the bus, like also completely. So, you know, just stay away from Precious is what I'm saying. She ain't that precious. Anyway, so let's see. But is scrutiny of Chinese firms justified? Question mark. You see, here it comes. A recent study from the School of Oriental and African Studies reports that negative stories about Chinese companies are mostly untrue. Broadly speaking, it shows that Chinese firms employ just as many local workers as non-Chinese companies and have similar pay and training standards. This is not true, by the way. The number of Chinese workers in Africa has also been on a downward trend since its peak in 2015, with a substantial 43% drop between 2019 and 2020, largely due to the pandemic. Well, I mean, that doesn't make things okay. So they dropped 43% because of the pandemic. Okay, so that means before that, obviously, all of these things were true. And it still is true, and it will continue to be true when the pandemic stuff calms down. Huawei is also under investigation by tax authorities in India after the government banned 54 mobile apps, mainly Chinese, over security concerns. Okay, so that's the be-all and the end-all. But the fact of the matter is that Huawei, this big company, has made a mistake by thinking that it can simply just hire 90% foreign workers. And I read in another article about this that the higher-ups in Huawei said, no, that's okay, we were given permission to do this. But then when the relative authorities were questioned, they were like, no, they were not given permission to do this. And that's kind of how things operate in China with businesses, is people just do this Chabador thing where they do what they want to do. I mean, everybody who's done business in China knows that this is how it works. You just do it. You don't ask permission. You start a business. Only when you get big enough and you start to get questioned about things, that's when you start to fix these issues. And that's when you start to follow regulations. So Huawei is no different. And we'll be keeping an eye on this story because I want to know if they actually end up having to make changes or if they're just going to bribe their way out of it. But we'll find out. Anyway, that's Huawei in Africa for you. And that is the end of Worldview. So it's time to move on to Yumcha. So Yumcha is when we get to relax. Finally, I get to relax and just chat with you today. Creepy Milk's here, but I mean, it's not like he's going to say much, really, other than stare at me over my shoulder here like a creep. But yeah, it's relaxing time. We're going to talk, have a chat. And for those of you who don't know how this works, Yumcha, you can watch it live. You also get to watch it over the weekend, but on Monday we cut it out put it on our Patreon. So you can still watch it. It's not behind a paywall, but if you do miss it over the weekend and live, you can always go back and watch it on the Patreon. So guys, for those of you who are not going to stick around for Yum Cha, or for those of you who have just tuned in after the weekend, we'll catch you in the next one and stay awesome.